Hey, it's Elizabeth D'Alto, and this is the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untame the Wild Soul is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, wild ones? Welcome to episode number 203 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today we are talking about grappling with the shadows and honoring the light with Alta. I am so excited about this conversation. I appreciate this conversation so much and what Laren brings to it, because there's so much going on in the world right now. Conversations around social justice, the intersection of the spiritual self-help / personal development world, and a more inclusive, equitable way of being. There are terms out there like light washing, which I love, which is people who want to just throw love and light at everything, which leads to a lot of spiritual bypassing, which is something that we've talked about in several episodes on the show. So today we're getting more up into this conversation specifically and talking about how do you hold both things? How can you be a warrior for the light and also not deny the darker, the more shadowy things? How do we not be afraid when something's negative that it's gonna harsh our vibe or lower our vibration and that we might manifest negative things? No. How do we just show up? How do we do our best? How do we be our best? So I want to give you a little background on my relationship with Laren. It's rare that I feel intimidated by anyone, but I remember coming across her for the first time a few years back and feeling that unfamiliar feeling. And I now know the reason why is because she was already embodying something I had only just begun to take a look at, which is shadow work and willingness to embrace our darkness and love others and ourselves anyway. So this conversation is a deep and powerful one where we talk about diving through the shadows to get to the center of your soul. We talk about what Laren calls shatter points and the strength that's available in those shadow points. And we also got into trusting your intuition over your intellect, real deal healing, the 5 bodies, as well as taking responsibility for your projections. It's so juicy. This is definitely another listen more than once type of episode. So I hope you enjoy it thoroughly. Share it up with anyone that you think would like it. And as a reminder, our show notes are always going to be where you find any resources, any books, any links to other things that we reference in the episode. The show notes for this episode will be at untameyourself.com/episode-203. As well, just a reminder that we have tons of free resources that help you dive deeper into many of the topics that we discuss here on the podcast. Morning rituals, how to trust yourself, how to let things go, how to integrate your masculine and your feminine energy. All of our resources can be found at wildsoulmovement.com/resources. So if you're wanting to go deeper, if you're wanting to expand your exploration of what you're learning here on the show, there are tons of things for you to get started with over there. All right, those are my announcements. Let's get into it. Laren!
Hello!
I'm so pumped to have you here.
Me too.
Your website is sisterfire.com, but I always think of it as like Spitfire because that's how I feel when I talk to you.
Oh, I like that. Thank you.
Sisterfire definitely sounds better though.
When I started Sisterfire, I was considering naming it Spitfire. My mother was like, do not name that Spitfire. Just no, don't do that. So
thanks, Mom.
Sisterfire it is, right? Exactly. But it's a good name. It's catchy. It's powerful. Spitfire.
And it's just true because you are.
Thank you.
What do you love about being a woman right now?
I love my curves today. I'm feeling very curvy and luscious.
You said today. So do you not feel that way all the time?
I'm not as curvy all the time. I've been eating a lot of things that contribute to the curves.
Nice.
So I'm just like allowing my body to feel that kind of fleshiness. And it feels good.
Yeah, I like that. So I'm really excited because you do a lot of work in the shadows. in the dark and the light. And I think it's just something that we can't talk about enough because a lot of the shame exists in the dark.
Yeah.
The things that keep us self-sabotaging and all these other things, that's all in the dark.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening, do you have your own working definition of what the shadow actually is?
I think of the shadow as those parts of ourselves that we've disowned, that we've hidden, that we have secretly tried to forget about, and that are still part of us, but we've buried them underneath the carpet. And to show this kind of polished and perfect and beautiful image to the world. But it's these parts of ourselves that really inform our rich and our depth and our complexity and our humanity that we need to integrate and honor, not disconnect from. So it's the parts that need mending and healing and honoring more so than shaming or silencing.
Yeah. So knowing that across the board, it tends to be true that we teach what we need to learn. What's your story that you feel like sharing around how you got into doing this or why you chose this path?
Oh, thank you for asking that question.
Oh, you're welcome.
I grew up in a house with a lot of silence and a lot of secrecy. I have a sibling who now, as an adult, has a diagnosed mental illness, but didn't have the diagnosis until adulthood. So it dominated my home. And we would have to kind of get up the next morning and pretend like nothing happened and pretend like everything was okay. So there was this kind of normalizing of violence and trauma and not honoring of my own feelings and needs around it. And I learned very early to just pretend, even though it never felt good or felt right. And so I was always out loud and vocal and verbal and agitated about it. But when I got more tools, got therapy, thank God, I could start owning those parts of myself and healing those parts of myself that I had not really validated or honored or supported, the parts that were tender and wounded and traumatized that needed to be mended and reclaimed.
So have you done technical training around trauma specifically?
As a practitioner or as a student or as
actually both received and or I know you do a lot of energy work and other modalities. I find trauma work to be fascinating and there's so many different ways.
Yeah, I have done both as a practitioner and as a recipient of trauma work. I have studied with lots of different people because I think that we're all experiencing different levels of trauma, regardless of whether we know it or not. And because my work started out in groups with a lot of women who were dealing with a lot of levels of trauma that they didn't even know how to do, I realized that trauma doesn't happen in isolation and neither does healing. And so I had to figure out, how do I hold this container for healing, for transformation, with varying degrees of consciousness around trauma that women may or may not know they have, but still have to deal with it and still have to heal it if they want to feel as whole as they are.
This is an amazing point because I am so, at this point, I can say this and mean it. And, people who listen to the podcast regularly have heard me reference that I came out of an emotionally abusive relationship with a very narcissistic person. And I didn't know. It wasn't until 2 months later, someone said something and a light bulb went off and I started Googling narcissism and I was like, oh, snap.
Yeah.
It all makes sense now. But then I realized that some other things that had always been at play. So like you're saying, you're walking around with some trauma in your system that's informing a lot of your actions, behaviors, relationships, what's going on in your world, but not knowing that's what it is.
Totally.
Being able to address it because, again, it doesn't have a label or a name yet.
Mm-hmm. And having shame and judgment around not being okay. Like, why am I feeling this way? How could I let myself do this? Why can't it just be okay? Why can't I have a healthy, all these things that we beat ourselves up for is not fair to us. So yeah. And who is going to teach us if our parents don't know? Often they're walking around with their own unhealed trauma and wounds. Yeah. So it's just like compounded until we're willing to say, no, this far and no further. I'm going to figure out how to heal this. And that's ultimately how I came into my own work, because I was miserable and I didn't know. I was depressed. I couldn't get up out of bed. I couldn't get up off the floor sometimes. I just didn't know how to feel powerful. outside of all of these things that I didn't think were important, like grades or, all of my accomplishments or people's approval of me or all these things that had nothing to do with how happy I actually was, how fulfilled I actually was. So I had to go within and start asking the hard questions that, nobody in my family wanted to ask because they had their own generational shame around mental illness and their own generational shame around why they didn't help my family member earlier and all that kind of stuff. So I had to really kind of go out on my own and start figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you encounter any methods or modalities of healing that were like ineffective or didn't help on your way to finding the ones that did? Or was it a pretty straightforward path for you?
I just used them all. So I think I took the different pieces that needed. So my first therapist, I was in college. Well, my first therapist when I was in college told me I was acting like a spoiled child who wasn't getting her way. That's what she told me when I told her I was depressed. That's literally what she said. So that didn't work. No. But my second therapist, the one that I got the most like really good work out of is a Hakomi therapist, she's a psychotherapist, but Hakomi is a body-centered kind of therapy. So we did a lot of meditation, a lot of body work, a lot of connecting with movement and really going deep into like cellular memory, all kinds of things. So I could get kind of the non-traditional and the traditional work with her because there's so much that was buried, so much that I had to swallow that I didn't know how to access that she helped me access.
And in your own work, I find this fascinating because I, as well, holding groups, whether it's online or offline, and even in the last few years, as I entered into this work at first, I didn't know nearly as much about trauma. And then I started observing how certain people would interact consistently and being like, oh, there's something else going on here. And then I realized how important it was to be trauma informed so I could spot things and know when something is out of my scope of practice.
Totally.
Actually, perhaps handle this thing first because otherwise this could be really harmful, not even helpful, do more harm than good.
Absolutely.
So, in your own work, when you hold space, sorry, I went on a tangent. I do this sometimes.
It's okay.
Because I geek out. How do you handle that? And I guess here's why I'm asking. Someone listening is in a group or in a program or goes to a retreat or goes somewhere and they get triggered. And they feel shame, or even in a yoga class, that happens sometimes, right? How do you recommend they handle that? Like as a person who holds space for people in that position to like give the perspective of like, it's totally okay. It's not wrong. How do you recommend people navigate that as they are locating their trauma?
For me, one of the kind of frameworks and prerequisites I work with in my work all the time is to take 100% responsibility for your own experience. That's the first step because people are going to trigger you. Experiences are going to trigger you. There's going to be somebody that you don't like because they reminded you of your brother, your uncle, your first grade teacher, whatever, and you're going to project your stuff onto them. All of that's fine as long as you're taking responsibility for it and not making it about them. So that's the first tenet of my work is that no matter what we're doing together, whether it's one-on-one or group work, that you are fully responsible for your own experience. I'm your guide. Your other people in the group with you are going to be your compatriots. They're going to be journeying with you, but your responsibility is your own. And then the other part is I am trying to be consistently intentional about making the distinction that my work is not therapy. So if you are in crisis, if you are having a mental break right now, if you don't want to go to therapy, I am not the place to go. I am an excellent supplement to therapy, to psychotherapy, to counseling, all of those kinds of work, but I am not a replacement for them. So I don't ever want to take that place of something that is beyond my scope of practice. So kind of those things. And then inside of that community, inside of the space, inside of the work that we're doing, you get more tools, you get more resource, you get more things to go into the work. And I will never take anyone past their point where they can't come back from. So that's important too, to take them to their edge and help them be as tooled and resourced as possible to navigate it. But I think, there's some therapies and modalities where it's like, just dump them in the deep end of the pool and they'll learn how to swim. And that's, to me, dangerous, and it can be re-traumatizing. And I never do that. So I am more interested in getting you equipped and resourced for where you are right now so that you can move forward, as opposed to dumping you in the deep end.
I'm really glad you're saying this, because I've actually been part of programs where there are people who are not trauma specialists, who do not have trauma training, and they're doing that with people. Mm-hmm. And it's so unsafe. It's so uncomfortable to witness. And it's happening in front of a room of people.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's unhealthy. It's unhelpful. And it's not, it's just, So I'm really glad that you said, though, it's not a replacement for therapy. Mm-hmm. Specifically because I feel like in self-help, personal development, especially more in areas where there's more of a spiritual bent, that there's almost like a little bit of stigma or shame about traditional modalities like therapy. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, if you're just love and light, if your energy is aligned, like, well, your energy might be, your chakras might be great, but if your nervous system is hijacked, like, hello, someone help you.
Exactly. I mean, and I think because I'm not only a student of things, but I'm also been through a lot of things and gotten my own, I've come through a lot of healing because of teachers, because of therapists, because of spiritual people, I've worked with all kinds of people to help me heal, because to me, healing is my ultimate goal. As me and as the work that I do, healing is my ultimate goal, to help people heal. So whatever it takes to get true healing, not fake healing, not superficial healing, not like trinkety healing, but like deep, true healing is what I'm here for that. And that may not be me in the moment, and it may be.
Yeah. And even that, so some people listening, I don't think you're being judgmental. I think you're saying there are some things when you say like real healing or like not trinkety, this doesn't mean, oh, I feel better for a week, but then my same exact issue, there it is again.
Right.
It means I'm able to react to something differently than I used to. It
totally.
means that thing doesn't trigger me nearly as much as it used to. Maybe it doesn't even trigger me anymore. There's benchmarkers for progress.
Absolutely. And I mean, when I say not superficial, because like you said, sometimes spirituality and healing gets this, like, it just needs to be love and light. It just needs to feel good. It just needs to be, and part of my philosophy is that healing requires death. Healing is going to be uncomfortable. Healing is not always going to be light and love. And that doesn't mean, again, dumping you into the deep end of the pool, but it does mean the willingness to be uncomfortable. It does mean the willingness to be challenged by yourself, by your own concept of yourself, or what you believe or what you need, and to go into these spaces and see what the gifts are in the shadow. And that's ultimately where the healing happens, not just on the surface or the love and light.
So you have this phrase, and I don't know if you coined it or if it came from somewhere else, but you talk about the shatter point. What is that?
The shatter point. I love talking about the shatter point. Because
clearly. You just got really excited.
I love talking about it, and I did coin it because it's the point. I tend to work with women who are super high achievers, type A, career driven, and they did all the quote unquote right things, right? So they got school, they got the degree, they got the marriage, they got the markers of accomplishment, which we are told are what our goals are. And then they get to that certain point where they realize all those things have nothing to do with their fulfillment and their happiness and their true satisfaction and joy. And often that revelation comes when they reach a shatter point. So shatter points can be, they're different for everybody. It can be death, it can be illness, it can be the loss, it can be a miscarriage, it can be bankruptcy, but it's the thing that happens that breaks you open and shakes you from the reality of what you thought you were living, the happiness that you thought was that one golden carrot, that if you just did that one next thing, you would achieve it. And the shatter point wakes you up and realizes, wait, I'm missing something. There's something else, and I need to go deeper. And the depth is inside, not outside. And so the shatter point breaks you open to help go start that journey.
And, even in the breaks you open, I feel like a lot of people in those moments, they probably don't feel like they're broken open. They probably just feel like they're broken. Yeah,
exactly. Totally. And so that's the shatter point is an opening that you have to cross. It's a choice. It's a decision. And you may not know what's on the other side. You just know that you can't keep doing what you were doing and that you have to take the chance. So I think of it as an initiation. Yeah. And before the shatter point, there are what I call splinter points. So splinter points are what contribute to the eventual shatter. So it could be those those gut moments that you ignore. Like, I knew something wasn't right, but I just did it anyway. I knew I had the feeling, but I just kept pushing forward. So those are all splinter points. They don't go unnoticed energetically, physically, emotionally. And then the shatter point is what catapults you. Oh, like, okay, wait, no, I can't do this anymore.
Oh yeah. I think anyone listening is probably doing what I'm doing right now. And it's like your life is flashing before your eyes. You're remembering shatter points that you have had.
Yeah.
And you're going, oh, yep, there's all those splinters.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about, and so that's the part that's about, how do you approach it with tools? How do you approach it with resource and compassion and forgiveness and gentleness? This is not the point when you want to keep pushing forward and hard and being hard on yourself, but how do you lovingly and compassionately accept yourself exactly where you are and cross the threshold with intention? And that's why it's helpful to have a guide like you or like me, someone who can hold your hand and lead you across the threshold to get the lessons, to get the gifts, to get the medicine, because it's ultimately medicine. It's all medicine for your healing.
Yeah. And we're all healing. I mean, I recently did a training at a mystery school. And one of the things that one of the intention prayers is about, like, for my healing. And I think it's great because I know some people worry that, you know, if I'm perpetually in self-help, do I just think I'm broken? Am I always trying to fix something? And I think this is a really good distinction. There's a difference between trying to fix something and healing and just understanding. We're all so conditioned. We've all just got stuff ancestral. We picked it up from our families like secondhand smoke. Yeah. We live in such a traumatized culture. There's so much collective in so many different ways that, like, we've all got healing to do, and we're not broken, but we've got shit.
Absolutely. And I think of healing, I believe that we are all born perfect, whole, and complete, right? Like, there's nothing we can do to mess that up. We can't sully it. We can't ever be broken. We are all whole. Healing is about returning to your wholeness. It's about remembering your wholeness. It's about honoring your wholeness, which can feel bold and brave and audacious in a culture that is, quite frankly, relies on you to think you're not whole. Because then we can sell all the things.
This phrase relies on you to think you're not whole. I think this is one of the best things about the podcast, is that in having these conversations, we are tipping people off to being able to see when they're being manipulated, when their buttons are being pushed, when the messaging is coming through. You're not okay. You should do this. This isn't okay. Lose 5 pounds. Have a tighter. Like, do you ever, I notice this sometimes at the grocery store, you see the magazines and you're like, damn, they're just waiting for me to be insecure and catch one of those headlines and be like, oh, I don't know, my arm's kind of jiggly.
Totally. It is. I mean, no matter where you turn, it's something.
Yeah. So. And listen, I'm not about, like, making the media all wrong and stuff, but there's a lot of messaging that really does prey on that perception or experience of non-wholeness.
Totally. 100%.
Oh, it's so good. So it's important, though, I think, and I've had this experience of having friends in my life who are very attached to the shadows and the pain, and they become like professional excavators.
Yep.
And they never, or I won't say never, but very rarely come up for air, let alone long enough to actually enjoy the work that they've been doing.
Yep.
So I know you like to talk about, dive into the shadows, but honor the light. What does that look like?
So I think of it as like if we're looking at a diving, right? So if we're on the outside, if we're living on the outside, kind of performing based on our ego, based on perception, based on reputation, based on how we look, or all these things, and we have to dive through the shadow to reclaim these parts of ourselves that we've forgotten, we've unloved, we've disowned. But we dive through the shadow, not to the shadow, through the shadow to the center of our soul. That's how I think about it. The soul is who we are in the center, the core. So we have to dive through the shadow so that we can get to the center of our soul, which is where our power is, where our truth is, and live from there, from the inside out. So I think you're totally right. Some people live on the outside. They live just on kind of the perception. Some people live in the shadow because it's comfortable to stay in the muck and gook. And it can feel uncomfortable living in their power. Still, it can feel uncomfortable and embracing their wholeness, because if they're just living there, they're still not embracing their wholeness, all of it, with love and compassion. So it's about diving through the shadow, getting the tools, getting the resource, getting the insight, reclaiming these parts of yourselves that you've misplaced or disowned, and then diving to the shadow, the center of your soul, which is all power.
I love this so much. And it actually circles back to trauma, because if someone does feel comfortable, like that sentence, if you just have it stand alone with no context, doesn't really make any sense. Someone's comfortable in the shadow.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. But why would someone be comfortable there? Because it's familiar.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, if you think about people who are always have something negative to say, right? They may not even realize that they always have something negative to say, that they're always complaining, that something's always wrong, that nothing can ever be right. And they may say, if it's not one thing, it's another. If I'm waiting for this other shoe to drop, like all these phrases that are in our culture that are just taken, okay, yeah, that's the truth. But some people live like that. They're looking for the negative because maybe they have trauma around being 5 years old. And no matter what good happened to them, they got taken away. They got punished. They got yelled at if they were too happy. I have seen 3-year-olds get yelled at by their parents for being too happy and energetic, for just being children. So that creates neuro connections, right? Where you are like, I can't have anything too positive or it's going to be taken away. So of course it feels more comfortable. That's just one tiny example, but of course it's more comfortable to not want to get too attached to something good.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So let's talk about intuition. People are always wanting more, connecting to their intuition. How do they know if something is their intuition? But I know you specifically talk about trusting your intuition more than your intellect.
Yes.
And it doesn't sound like you want us to leave the intellect out.
No. But it is important to honor. So I think of, there are 5 different bodies that we have, 5 different ways of knowing. We have our mental body, which is our intellect. We have our emotional body. We have our energetic body. We have our spiritual body. And we have our physical body. So there are all kinds of ways that we know things that don't always connect with the other bodies, right? So if you feel something in your body, you get a chill, or you get the hair stands up on the back of your neck, your brain doesn't always know exactly what that means, but your body knows. Or if you're feeling something in your energetic body and you can feel it, but you don't necessarily know how to say that, articulate it in words, there's something else, right? So there's all different ways of knowing. And when we honor all 5 of those ways, we're in our power, we're in our trust. But we live in a culture that trusts the intellectual body, what we can measure, what we can quantify, what we can put in a book, what we can quote unquote prove by science, as the number one and most important way of knowing. And it's while it's important, of course, it's not, I don't think, more important than all of these other bodies. And part of the way patriarchy works is that emotions have been delegated to women and therefore not as important. So it's like, if you feel something, it's not, who needs feelings? It's not that deep. What do you think? And they're all actually important. We need them all to be well-rounded and alive and vibrant and connecting to ourselves and each other and God and the universe and all that.
Big time. So the training I was mentioning earlier, where I was seeing a facilitator push someone into the deep end of the pool and not know how to handle it when they got there. It was a 5-day training, and I actually left on the 4th day and didn't finish because one of the very last things they said at the end of that day was, you can't trust your feelings. And I even went up to the guy afterwards to clarify. And I was like, excuse me, I just want to double check that I'm not misinterpreting. And he explained it. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, this is not aligned for me. I'm not going to finish this training. Because you're like feeling, and there's different types of feelings, right? There's like your senses, like your sensational feeling, sensual, and then your emotions. And I can get down with, I'd be curious for your opinion on this. I can see not giving as much stock all the time to emotions, because that could be reacting to things, especially if there is trauma, right? But just making a blanket statement with no distinction, like you can't trust your feelings. I was like, yikes, get me out of here.
Yeah, that's not fair. And it's just not true. It's not true. I mean, I have so many thoughts about men who say you can't trust your feelings, because there are certain feelings, right, that men are given. Anger, they're given, frustration. They're allowed, and those are feelings too, but they're allowed to trust those feelings. So it's complicated, and it's colored by this idea of patriarchy and when, emotions, and they aren't reliable. And I think it's complex. So I think about it on one hand, it's like, you may not always trust your feelings. That's fair, but it's important to acknowledge them.
Yeah.
And to honor them. So even if you're feeling, jealous, and maybe in your mind it's like, I know I should not, quote unquote, feel jealous. You have to honor that feeling, because it's your feeling, and then meet it with compassion, and not necessarily letting it lead the way, but what do you want to do with that? Okay, what need of yours is not being met, and how can you meet that need? So it's not about like being reactionary, but it's about honoring what's true for you in the moment, and learning, developing tools, being more resourced to work with your emotions and to develop them and to heal those deeper wounds that are causing the things. But it's a layered process, right? It's not simple.
Yeah. And it's very complex. And I'm glad that you said that and used that specific word, because again, for people listening, as always, we're sharing our experiences, things that we've found, many different studies, different bodies of work and things. These are not necessarily absolute truths.
Absolutely not.
These are our experiences. And I'm always reminding people, you got to try things on. You got to see what resonates for you. You have to see what works for you. And also, do work and choose to work with people who will center your experience and not like have it be, this is the friggin' way it is.
Totally. And I think part of it is we're in such a black and white binary world around feelings, like these are good, these are bad, these are right, these are wrong, that we aren't even comfortable feeling our feelings, because we're automatically trying to not feel things that are uncomfortable, which is part of learning how to dive into the shadows, learning how to be uncomfortable and resourced, learning how to be uncomfortable and tooled, learning how to be uncomfortable and not project, learning that if you are projecting, how to take responsibility for it. It's like wherever you are, how do you do it with love and compassion? How do you be angry and not violent? How do you be angry and not explosive? How do you be angry and not mean? Like all of these doesn't make anger bad. It just means like, how do you do it in a loving way? And loving could be like not talking to anybody, because you need to figure out how to process your own anger. There's all kinds of ways to deal with it.
It's so great. And so talk about this for a second. Come back to, if you are projecting, how do you take responsibility for it?
Part of it is slowing down. Right? Like slowing down, breathing, checking in and seeing what's actually happening. Like, is this my stuff or is this your stuff? Is this from now or is this from 5 years ago? Is this from what's actually active and present and alive right now for me? And how do I own that? So like, remember I said in the beginning, my work is framed around taking 100% responsibility for your own experience. So if someone does something that makes you mad, not to say take responsibility for their behavior, but take responsibility and ownership for like your right to be mad. You can be angry. That doesn't mean they have to do anything different.
Right.
But you have a right to be angry. And now what? Right.
So, and now what is a great question. I've gotten so much out of resentment in the last few years, because I feel like whenever resentment bubbles up, it is just this huge signal to me to go, I co-created a situation here that I am now pissed off about.
Yeah.
And I just want to blame the other person.
Yeah.
Make it about their inadequacies. But if I feel resentful, it's a huge signal that like that shit is at least half my fault.
Yeah.
How did I do that?
Yeah.
What now? Like, what can I clean up on my end of the street? And this is I feel like healthy. It's such a healthy way to look at things because you can be so much more resourced if you're just like handling your own stuff.
Right.
Than being so enmeshed with like the finger pointing and needing other people to be different. Cause that's like, you can't create that necessarily.
Absolutely. When I think of resentment, I think of it as a breach of your own boundaries. Usually it has something to do with compromising in a way that you didn't want to, like giving more than you wanted to and expecting something in return. Overgiving and not articulating it, not saying what you wanted or what you needed, but kind of hoping that they would figure it out and give it to you because you gave that. Not you in particular, but this is what I think of when I think of resentment. So then it's like, how do you take not beating yourself up, not judging yourself, but like, where did you violate your own boundaries? Start there. Yeah. And then
keep going.
No, you go.
I was going to say, and sometimes it's a place that shows you where you need a boundary.
Yes.
You didn't even know. And that's actually how you got there. That's one of the big things I've actually gotten about resentment. It's shown me, oh, I need a boundary here. Yeah. Or, oh, I was overgiving because I didn't realize that was a place where it's really easy for me to overgive. So I actually need to self-regulate on that because otherwise I'm just going to let that go like a fire hose.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And then you can change it, right? Like no love lost. You're not like, then you can change it because you have the power. But if you've given that person the power of your boundary, of your resentment, if they're in charge, then you can't change it. Yeah. It's out of your control.
So I'm curious. I know you and I very, very different, but very similar in some ways. And I'm sure you get feedback from people that you're intimidating. Yeah.
I have heard that.
Like, heard that a few times. How do you personally navigate? What is that experience like for you? I get that a lot. And I obviously don't want to be intimidating to people, but in my authentic expression of myself and like loving myself and honoring myself, it just intimidates people because it's still different. It's still different in this culture. It's still different. And it's way more rare than I wish it was.
Yeah, I have heard that before. And I just keep being myself. Yeah. I like people and I'm usually pretty friendly, not all the time because I'm also an introvert. So I may not be, which can contribute to me being intimidated. I don't have any hair. I wear big earrings, like physically I can look intimidating to people. But I just keep showing up and being Laren. And I think the people who resonate with me hopefully will feel connected enough to want to have a conversation. And those who don't, or who have to take some time, will hopefully take their time. But I don't actually worry about it too much.
I like that. I do have this like very tender bleeding heart that is sometimes conflicting with like being my full expression, but it's because it's like, but no.
Yeah.
And I know that you're right, that you just can't, at the end of the day, you can never, ever, ever control. There's nothing we could do to control that. We will always be misinterpreted, projected upon, judged by some people.
Totally. And like, I can be shy. I'm introverted and I can be shy. So I love parties. I love social gatherings, but I can also feel overwhelmed when I walk into a social gathering. So sometimes I like to be in a quiet corner and like just talk to one person at a time. And, so I have to honor myself with that too. Like people may be intimidated by me, but I have my own social anxiety too. We all do.
Yeah. It's so funny you bring that up. So last night I went to a friend's house. This is a relatively new friend. And I actually got there before she returned home. LA traffic. She was a few minutes late. And her partner and another one of their friends was there. And I like peeked in and I saw them in there. And I was like, maybe I'll just wait out here until she gets here. And I'm sure people listening might be surprised that like I would actually choose to do that. And I stood out there for a little while and I was like, oh, this is a cool edge for me. I'm gonna knock on the door. I'm gonna go in, and it is uncomfortable. I don't necessarily, because I don't know anything about these other people. Would I connect with them? Am I interrupting a moment? Like there's all kinds of things, and I'm like, whatever. I said I would be here at this time. I'm here at this time. I'm just gonna knock on the door. And I sat there, and I got to be with feeling a little uncomfortable. And the irony was, are you into Brene Brown stuff?
I think I've read one of her books.
I was listening. I just downloaded on Audible her new book, Braving the Wilderness, and it's all about belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, look at that. I was just listening to this damn book, and then here I am thinking, oh, here I go again. I have a little bit of story like, oh, here I am again, going to be sticking out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. I think it's like those things that we want so deeply, we crave so much that we're afraid of, right? It's also talking about, like we were talking about earlier, when folks maybe talking about negativity so much because they crave intimacy so deeply, but they're afraid of it. It's that same thing, like we crave belonging, but it's also like, what if I say something wrong? What if I do something wrong? Oh no, what if I don't want to, So then it's just like, how do you get resourced and tooled enough to do it a little bit at a time? Stand outside on the sidewalk, breathe, get grounded. You don't have to rush in.
Yeah.
And go in when you feel centered and ready.
And I think the context, like you were saying, you're an introvert. And so if it's a party or it's a big thing, you might want to be on the perimeter. For me, this was like a new thing. Would I have done that if there were other people in there who I already knew? No, it would have been totally different. But it was like two people I hadn't met. And so I think context is everything. And yet still the point of gentleness, like you were saying, I wasn't beating myself up. I was like entertained. Right. I was like entertained, observing myself, being like, oh, look at you being shy.
Yeah.
I'm like, why don't you just go in there? It's going to be fine. Like,
yeah, because it also reminds us that we're human and we're complex and we have all of these different facets and sides of us. Like you're a boss ass business owner, coach, healer, spiritual teacher, all these things, which so people, like you said, may not expect you to be feeling a little shy outside with new people. But that's another part of your personality that makes you human and gives you a deeper well of compassion so that when someone comes to your gatherings and they maybe see on the outside a little bit, you know what that feels like. It's
100%. Yeah, because it's different. It's why I love hosting things.
Right. Me too. Me too.
It's so much easier when I'm in charge.
Totally. 100%.
Not from like a control place, but from an actual space holding place.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Because I know the space is good.
Yeah.
I have tended to the energy.
Yes. Complete. That's how I feel. Like I love to dress up. I'm usually overdressed, a little bit overdressed for every occasion because I just love to dress up. It makes me feel good. I like big earrings. I like long dresses. I like dressing up. And for me, that helps me feel more comfortable and confident when I'm going into new situations. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm dressed up usually everywhere, but especially in new situations. If I feel like I'm dressed like me, then I feel like me.
And I appreciate that distinction because some people would say, well, that's a mask. Are you defining yourself by your clothes and your makeup or whatever? And you're like, no, this is me being me. There's a difference. You're not hiding behind any of those things. Those are your expression of who you are.
Exactly.
That's awesome. You know, what's funny? I was watching one of your Instagram stories the other day and you were wearing like a Lululemon, like a zip up jacket or something. I don't know if it was Lululemon, but it was like a track jacket. And I had a moment. You are. You're like everything I've ever seen of you. You are like slightly, it's like overdressed. Like you always look so put together. And I was like, oh shit, she's wearing sneakers. It was awesome. It was weird, but it was awesome.
Thank you. It is a very, I'll tell you a little secret. This is the real secret. I love to dress up. And so I am overdressed, like I said, most of the time, but I am not as good dressing casually. My casual looks are not very cute. They just are not. It's a department I got to work on. So because I just like dressing up. So when I do dress casual, it's very casual usually.
I mean, I spend most of my life in that outfit that you had on in the thing. Like I'm super casual. When I dress up, it's like an occasion. When my friends see me dressed up, they're like, damn. And it's only because the contrast of that I usually look like ass.
You do not look like ass.
But like, you know what I mean? Like very little effort has been made.
No, I understand. I trust me from the depth of my heart. I understand.
I want to come back to self-trust because even this, right? Trusting that, you know what? Some people might feel self-conscious about not wanting to be overdressed. And actually, I'll give you a little secret because I am like queen casual over here. Whenever I'm going somewhere, that's always, I'm asking like a bunch of people, what are you wearing? What do I wear? And what are you wearing? Because that is like, if I have any social anxiety, it's like, I wouldn't really, that's a little extreme to call it that, but like, who wants to be totally like not necessarily wearing, it's not about the right thing, but like not even close.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. I think that's the fun of like, for me being such a overdresser that I know I'm usually going to be dressier than most people. So I just,
it's not even a thing. It's like, I'm probably gonna be more dressed up than these people and it's totally fine.
Exactly.
So coming back around to self-trust, you know, that's an expression of self-trust. Just like, you know what? I don't even really care. Like I'm going to show up and I'm going to be me. And that's actually all that matters because if I feel like myself, I'm going to be able to be more of myself in whatever the situation. What else are ways that you have come to like a deep, deep self-trust?
I am a truth teller. Because like I said in the beginning, you know, I grew up in a house with a lot of silence and a lot of secrecy. Yeah. And I learned how to tell the truth. Clarity became so important to me. Directness became so important to me. Responsibility became so important to me for myself because I just feel healthy and alive and whole when I am truthful. And so now I just, especially with my mother, who I love and I'm very close to, but I tell her the truth. Even this morning, I said something to her and we don't have this traditional, we have a traditional relationship in a lot of ways, but I'm not a dutiful daughter. I don't just say like nice things to make sure that she feels good no, I just say my thoughts. And this morning she was like, why do I even ask your opinion? And I said, because you want the truth. You ask my opinion when you want to hear the truth. And then she was like, okay, you're right. You know, like she can't, where other people are very like, you know, people pleasing and making sure that she feels good about her opinion. My mom has a very important social status in Seattle and all these kinds of things. So people don't always like to rock the boat or like challenge her and all that. So I'm like, that's why I'm here.
Come here when you want it straight.
Exactly. So that's kind of like the truth. That's how I show up in most of my relationships, friendships, professional relationships, that friends ask me for advice when they want when they're tired of kind of playing games with themselves, when they're tired of fooling themselves, or, yesterday, for example, this is not a friendship, but I was checking out of a hotel and my partner yesterday in Palm Springs, and there was like an extra charge that it was like a hidden fee. Mm-hmm. And then we got in the car and it was like this conversation, there was this hidden fee. And I was like, I'll be right back. And so I went back into the hotel and had a conversation with the manager and got our extra fee returned to us because we didn't even know that it was going to be there when we checked in. It was a significant hidden fee. So I think of myself as the big guns that you bring me. Don't bring me out when when there's other, but when it's time to have that conversation, and for me, that's about self-trust. I don't second guess myself, as a child, I don't know if this is kind of an adage that you may have heard growing up, but it's like, don't start lying because you have to keep lying to keep up the lies. Yeah. So that's how I feel about the truth. Like I just tell the truth because I have to keep, that's the only thing I want to keep up is the truth.
I love that. And yeah, actually the way I've heard that saying is if you tell the truth, you don't need a good memory.
Aha. Exactly.
I dig this. I am the same. I'm the same. It's like, people will come. I had a friend recently, she has a podcast as well. And she's like, can I send you something to listen to? Let me know what you think. Something I've gotten used to saying is, how direct can I be with you?
Yes. Yeah. I say, how would you like me to support you with this?
Yeah.
I ask for and then I am like, okay, you want to hear everything? Let's talk.
All right.
Right, exactly.
Because I don't need, like, I could, and this is something that I've learned. So this is like kind of an intent versus an impact thing. Just like you, I am highly committed to the truth. And I realize that sometimes it's not that people can't handle the truth, but it's going to be confronting. It's going to be very uncomfortable. And so I have found to have the impact that I want to have, which is to be helpful and of service. I like to check in around, like, how do you want to receive this? Because if you don't need me to, like, be gentle about it, I could just shoot it straight, and it might be a little abrupt, or it might be whatever it might. So depending on the person or how well I know them or whatever, this is what I actually love about working with clients is because they're paying you, they asked for it.
Exactly.
This is what you're paying me for.
I'm right there.
Never a jerk.
Right.
Know?
Never.
But it's like, this is what you signed up for. This is
totally. That's exactly how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. Like, this is why we're here together, so that we can go there with love and compassion and truth and clarity. Like,
and truth is like a fluid thing, right?
Yeah.
Because what's true for you or me in this moment, a month from now, could be different. Like, people who listen to this podcast, who've been listening since, like, the beginning, have heard my opinions change and pivot and incorporate new viewpoints, integrate new things, ditch things, update my phrasing of things that I'm like, that's not actually as complete as I would like it to be. And it's not hypocritical. It's like, we're just always evolving.
Totally. And that's the truth, right? Like, the truth, like you said, is alive. So it's always growing, it's changing, it's evolving. And that's important to notice. It's important to name that the truth will grow and change, even as your awareness of it changes.
Yeah. And it's so good. Like, I don't know what feels better than aligning with my own truth, even when it is in contrast to other people's, even when it causes, like, loss or pain, or you lose someone who didn't want to be with you in that space. It still is just like, I don't know why I find it to be the absolute most nourishing thing there is.
Absolutely. I think there's like a click or a moment that happens when you realize that you have the capacity to handle the truth, regardless of what it is. Once you know that you can handle it, then it's like so much more welcome. But often we're afraid of it. And so we don't want to hear it. We don't want to handle it. We don't want to know it. But once we know we can handle it, then it's like, okay, bring it on. And that, like, it doesn't mean anything about who we are as of our value or our worth or anything, like, and then we can take it or leave it.
Yeah. And I think this comes back to that shatter point conversation in a way, because in the moments of, like, the deepest, the biggest truth, sometimes the painful truth, you can look back and be like, damn, well, if I could handle that, I totally got this. It's where the resilience comes from.
That's it. That's why it's the shatter point, because it shatters you, and then you come through the initiation, but you come through it. You're stronger. I think of so many of my, like, I had brain surgery 5 years ago. That was a major shatter point for me, physically and emotionally and mentally. All kinds of things, like, had to change because I had a hole in my head and my brain was shrunk. All kinds of stuff happened, but it was a shatter point. I had a shatter point when I had depression for the first time and literally couldn't get off the floor. I had a shatter point when I walked in on my lover in bed with someone else. There's all kinds of shatter points that I've experienced that I've had to, like, grow through and not hide and shrink from. And that's the choice. Am I going to grow through this fully, truthfully, honestly? Or am I going to shrink and run away and hide, which I've also done too.
Yeah. And somewhere between those two things you just mentioned is bypass.
Yeah.
How do you feel about spiritual bypass?
Oh, I think it's dangerous for everyone involved. I think it's a disservice and it's dangerous because it doesn't actually get to healing. It's just smoothing things over to feel good. And that's not what healing is. Healing, as I said earlier, requires death. Healing is uncomfortable. It's not always sexy. It's not always pretty. It's definitely not always linear. And it can't be wrapped up in a pretty bow. And I think spiritual bypassing is the way of trying to make it put into a box, make it fit into some other expectation. And that's not the way it works. So I think it's dangerous when we do things as spiritual bypassing without being willing to honor what the truth is, the truth of the matter is.
Do you believe in our healing journey? I know you said it's not linear, but do you believe that we can go backwards ever?
No. I think of healing as a spiral. I think of life as a spiral. So it's like we go up on this spiral. So we may get to a similar place. Like I dated the same person in different bodies for years, like years and years and years and years. And until I really had a revelation, like, oh, this is my pattern, not their pattern. This is me showing up. So it wasn't going backwards, but I had to keep learning the lesson until I learned it. And so that's how I kind of think of it. How do I get more tooled and more aware and more self-resourced so that I don't have to date the same person over? And even if I do it differently.
Right. This is the stuff. We talk about the spiral analogy all the time.
Yes.
And I asked that question because this is one of the ways that I see people beating themselves up the most. Saying like, I went backwards. I did all this work and look where I am again. Or saying things like, I'm back where I started. And I just don't believe anyone can ever be back where they started.
No, I don't agree with that either, because I agree with that. I mean, I don't think anyone can ever be back where it started, because if we live in a continually expanding universe, then there is no back to go back to. Everything is evolving and changing. You're growing. Even if it's like, I know people who've married the same person more than once, more than twice, actually.
My parents have done that.
Okay, exactly.
They remarried each other.
Exactly. But even in there, how many? Twice?
Once. They divorced and then we got remarried.
Okay, so even in the remarry, they were both different people. So it's not like they married the same person they did however many years ago they did. You cannot step in the same river twice. So I just think it's like compassion. Be compassionate and gentle with yourself. You're learning and growing. You're human. It's okay.
Yeah. So something I'm really into lately, I'm using the term, and actually this might be the focus of my whole year, holy consistency. How are you bringing some, and I can explain it if you want me to, but I feel like I don't have to explain it. How are you bringing some holy consistency to your life right now? Or how have you been? Like, what are your rituals? Or where is it? You don't need to tell us your specific rituals. I feel like that's very private. You can if you want to. But where is it in your day that you are like, you have some thing that you must do or whatever so that you could be Lauren every day?
I meditate every day. I try to read every day. Right now I'm reading The Dark Side of the Light Chasers.
That was my very first back in like 2009 or something.
Yes. I've had it probably that long, but I've never read it. And I'm reading it and I'm like, oh yeah, exactly.
Yes,
this is what I'm talking about. Debbie Ford, she's so good.
Yeah.
I try to write every day, but my first ritual in the morning before I get out of bed, usually even before I open my eyes, there's a Bible verse that says, "This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." And I say that to myself because I have to get myself off the hook of having to be in charge of the day. I need to surrender to something bigger than myself. So this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. So like, no matter what happens, I'm going to do my best, rejoice and be glad in it. Like, it's all good. I'm going to do my best. And that's enough for me. And so then I have these other things that help me connect and listen. And I do have other practices and rituals and things that I do. I'm all like, I'm at my desk. So I have this picture. Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
This is me and my grandma. When I was on my first trip at the airport, I'm getting ready to go to my first trip to India when I was 19 by myself. So like I have pictures around me to remind me of who I am, why I do what I do, what's important to me. But yeah, wholly consistent. Yeah. And I think of my work as a devotional practice. Totally. So every day it's not about me as much as how do I be of service? How do I do the work that I was born to do? How do I heal and like be used? So my prayer is like, use me, like move through me. Because the moment I get in my ego and I think I'm in charge and I think I know what's happening, No, it's not. It doesn't go well. It's too
Doesn't
stressful.
go well.
No. So I'm like, okay, use me. Just tell me what to do, what to go, who to talk to. And when I get stressed out, I have to remember that.
This is a great point because actually it can go pretty well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's certainly not going to go as well as it could.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like
We can really trick ourselves into thinking it's going well.
and then it's like, wait a minute, this could go even better if I would like calm down and
Or it's
surrender.
like, hey, Splinter Point. Thanks for letting me know.
Exactly.
I was bullshitting myself a little bit there. What kind of meditation do you do?
Vipassana meditation. So the way the story is that it was passed down by the Buddha and it was ended up in Burma for centuries. And, but you learn it through a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Yeah.
So I've done that 10-day silent meditation retreat 5 times.
No way.
And I have it, and it's 11 hours of meditation a day for 10 days, which is the hardest thing to do, but it's so good. I have breakthroughs every time.
Oh, cool.
Because I just sit in my shit for 11 hours.
It's 11 hours. You're gonna face it.
Right.
That's some shadow diving right there.
Exactly.
What is your website? Tell everyone where they can find you.
You can find me at sisterfire.com, which will redirect you to LarenAlta.com, but Sisterfire is easier to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So sisterfire.com is where I am.
And social media, your personal Facebook page is primarily where you operate out of, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And Instagram.
Yes, you write such beautiful things. Talk about truth, right? Someone asked me, who was I talking to? I met these random people at breakfast this morning. I was just chatting with the people next to me. And he asked me, like, who do I look up to? And I'm like, that's such a great question. And I'm like, how much time you got, buddy? But you are one of the people who, like, if something that you have written pops up in any of my feeds, I'm like, ooh, like, I can't wait to read it. Whereas there's some people that it's like, oh, damn, I didn't unfollow this person yet. But for you, I'm like, oh, maybe I need to save this for later because I need to be present for this. Your way of articulating things, like your passion, your fire, it's truthy.
Thank
so
you.
Good, you know?
Thank you.
And obviously we have a lot of resonance. So I know some people listening might not feel that way. Don't feel left out. I feel that way. I need to project how I feel onto the whole podcast listenership. But thank you. This is so great. So fun.
Yeah, you're magnificent. Thank you.
Thank
you for having me. And for you for being a beacon of truth in the world. We need you. We need your fierceness and your brilliance and your love and your fire and your radiance. So thank you for being you and doing the work that you do. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is the one thing I don't like about having a podcast. I always want to hug the people when it's over. And I
can't. Oh, yeah.
I'll give you a little air. I'll give you a little pretend squeeze. So Laren, thank you. We're going to have you back because we could just keep going forever. Everyone check out Laren, read the things that she writes. She is a spitfire.
Thank you.
And where we started. So thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Consciousness means that you're aware that judgment is a very limited lens to look through. Like when we're conscious, we're aware that we're conditioned to be judgmental. We're conditioned to look through the lens of good, bad, right, or wrong. And we're also kind of conditioned to buy into the illusion of separation, that I'm me and you're you, and we're not connected, and not connected to anything bigger than me.